I went too fast. And I got to go back. Sorry, technology. So again, let me start by introducing myself more fully. Allison Jaffe. I'm a licensed real estate broker. I'm a sole practitioner. I am Key Real Estate Services. That's my company. And as a real estate broker, I specialize in working with senior homeowners, caregivers, and caregivers who eventually might need to sell a family home, and they themselves are seniors. And under that title of Seniors Real Estate Specialist is about 50% of my practice is a seniors real estate specialist. And I'm going to define more and more what that is, but let me give you some examples of my clients. The lady in the background is Judy, and that's her mom, Helen, who their story was eventually told in this article in the New York Times in 2014. But the short version is that Judy felt that Helen was not thriving in the senior residence that she was living in, and determined that she was going to find a home that she and Helen could live in together so that Judy could be her mom's primary caregiver. We actually wound up finding that home on Helen's 99th birthday. And happily, I was at her 100th birthday party the following year in the house. And kind of bittersweet, but I can report that Helen passed away at home at the age of 104 last year. So the goal was met. Other clients have included, on the left there, a homeowner who sold her house after being there. If I remember correctly, she was there for about 48 years, house in East Chester, and she decided it was time to move down to where her daughter lived, and into actually an independent living apartment, and we sold her house. On the right is an example of an estate property that was sold by the surviving member of the family who built and lived in that house for all of those 85 years. He was a year younger than the house and lived in Naples, Florida. So when the time came, we sold the house in the Bronx. This was an interesting case where an 86-year-old client sold what was his bachelor apartment before he got remarried 40 years before. And they held on to it as an investment property. It didn't hurt anything. But at the time that a longtime tenant moved out at 86, he wasn't going to start with a new tenant. So we sold the house happily to a woman who had been her parents' caregiver in her childhood home in Harrison. And when her parents both passed, she sold the house and was able to make this purchase as a first-time home buyer and set herself up for her own retirement years. And then most recently, I've actually been living my clients' lives, because in the last 5 months, I moved my father back from Arizona after 25 years to an apartment in New Jersey because the time had come. And so there's all kinds of stories, but they all boil down to this particular subject of staying in a long-time home or finding that moment when it's right to relocate. And should I stay or should I go is a tool to help you make that kind of decision. I start with this quote, which came from AARP. They did a study back in 2014 also, that observed that, when facing this decision, a lot of people would like to stay in their home, at least in their community, but for a lot of people, it means a relocation. And that was a nice thought, that you have that control back in 2014, but we live in 2020. And the coronavirus pandemic may have changed the way you're thinking about this, this transition at this point in your life. So as I show you how should I stay or should I go works, I'm going to ask you to think in terms of pre-March 2020. Okay, how did you feel about your current home before all of this happened related to coronavirus, all of the restrictions? And then at the end, we'll come back to this notion, that this now has been a changing experience that may impact your thoughts about staying or going. So in general, should I stay or should I go is a tool I created based on all of that experience I shared with you and many more clients. And it works like this. It's really a very simple, straightforward survey, asks a bunch of questions related to your current home. And I encourage people that when you use this, you do it honestly with yourself, because you're not required to share your answers with anybody. And so if you're going to get the most out of it, be honest with yourself. And I'll show you a little bit more detail about how that works. We'll go through it section by section. We're talking about your home's actual structure. How compatible is it with you now? And by now, I mean, again, before COVID. So are the stairs an obstacle? Now, this is a pretty typical front entry staircase. This actually happens to be a Riverdale apartment building. We see these kinds of entrances all over the place. But you might also live in a home. This is a Bronx townhouse, steep set of stairs. You can find those kinds of stairs outside or inside. So are those stairs a problem? Manageable? Have you changed your behavior? Perhaps if your front entry to your building has a staircase like we saw earlier, have you taken to going in the service entrance where there are no stairs? That's an example of a changed behavior. Or are you afraid of those stairs every time you have to use them? How easily can you get in and out of the tub or shower in your bathroom, whether it's a pre-war, mid-century, an 80s renovation, maybe something that was installed in the 90s that seemed like a good idea at the time, or this is a really typical mid-century Riverdale, anywhere in New York City, co-op bathroom. A tub that's too low to sit on, but maybe too high to comfortably step over, a low vanity, a low toilet, but that's what we get. So are these fixtures in your bathroom problematic, not an issue? That's the choice, anywhere on that scale. Flooring. Now we all know where there's a room that looks like this with 45-year-old shag carpet, and it doesn't have to be in a house. You can also have old shag carpet in your living room, in a co-op, in an apartment. This carpet's been down so long, you see the ripple here in the center of it? That could be a trip hazard, especially if you are unsteady on your feet, if you're using a walker or a cane. If it's no problem, then it's no problem. If you had to change your behavior, or it's something that has caused you pain or is just downright dangerous, it's a consideration. Moving on to the doorways. Okay, if you're lucky enough to live in a building that has an automatic door, it's probably not an issue. But if you live in many apartment buildings like we find in Riverdale, you've got that outside lobby and then the interior lobby. And in the winter, when the airlock hits and it's really hard to open those doors, that could be a problem. Again, have you had to change your behavior, or is this a dangerous situation for you to be in without a real way to deal with it otherwise? That's a question. Other examples, if you have a sliding door out to a deck, a balcony, anything, but you've also got a lot of furniture around blocking your way, this can be hard to maneuver, especially if your balance isn't great. Here's a very typical, again, doorway in a New York City apartment building, whether it's a co-op, a rental, a condo. If it's more than 20 years old, you've probably got a bathroom door that's 24 inches wide and has that kind of marble saddle at the doorway, which can be a trip hazard. And if you're using a walker, perhaps, you're not getting through a 24-inch door with a walker. And so then you're on your own, and if your balance isn't good, could be an issue. If it's manageable, then it's not. But it could be, on the other extreme, dangerous. The laundry. Is your laundry in the basement of your house, or is it in the basement of your building? Either way, how accessible is it to you? Do you know when somebody is calling or knocking at the door, ringing the doorbell? And in apartment buildings, it's not uncommon to find these kinds of intercom systems that the ring is on your house phone. And if you can't hear the house phone ringing, you don't know somebody's at your door, this could be a problematic situation. And it could be dangerous if you can't know when somebody's trying to get to you. So that's structurally. Also, how financially compatible is your home with you? It goes for monthly expenses, monthly maintenance, HOA fees, other assessments, utilities like cable. If you're in a building, if you're in a home, a single family or multifamily home, you're also paying for fuel. These are monthly expenses, including your mortgage, if you still have a mortgage on it. And then your annual expenses, like property taxes and school taxes. Maybe not so much if you're in a co-op, but are these expenses fine with you now? They're manageable? Have you had to cut back on some of your other spending? Have you made late payments? Or do you find yourself in arrears at this time? And we go on to back to the space you're living in. If you're living in a house, are you using just a limited number of rooms or living mostly on one floor of your home? Or if you sometime in the past moved into a comfortable, roomy, one-bedroom apartment, you've already downsized once, you may be using most or all of the rooms in your home. But if you're still living in a 3-bedroom, 2.5 bath apartment, you're probably not using it all if you're there alone. Something to consider. And then the amenities. Are you using a fireplace if you have these things? A backyard pool or your building's pool? Maybe you're not using it as often as you used to. A deck or an apartment balcony. How often is it being used? Often, only when you have guests, seasonally. Some of these things naturally are used seasonally. Only occasionally, are you never using these things anymore? Are you still gardening, using the backyard, using your garage, whether it's in a private home or it's in your building? A lot of people are holding on to parking spaces after they stop driving. So the question is, how often are you using it? Are you paying for something that you're holding on to just for the weekly visit from family members? It might be an issue. Other things like a finished basement, if it's only used when the grandkids come. Or if you don't have a house, you're in an apartment, how about the gym in the building? That's another amenity that you may or may not be using as often as you used to. I'm clicking, but nothing's moving. There we go. How well is your home aging? Your home needs maintenance too. So are these things happening regularly, periodically, as needed, or are they being deferred or just not happening, even when needed? So we're talking about how often is your home cleaned, preventative maintenance is done, repairs and updates are made. How often does the super come, or how long has it been since your apartment or your home was painted, carpets cleaned, that kind of thing. That all goes into how well your home is aging. And then finally, the personal needs, the social interaction. Are your heart and your home in the same place? How often do you see the people who are close to you? Daily, weekly, monthly, annually, only on special occasions? How often did you now I know, again, this is pre-COVID. How often are you socializing with friends? How often were you pursuing interests outside your home? Now, a lot of things are closed down now, but then again, a lot of things are happening online. But how often were you getting out to pursue those interests? And how did you get there? Are you still driving? Driving only during certain hours of the day? Relying on mass transit or a car service? Relying on paratransit? Or simply not going out unless somebody takes you to things like medical appointments, grocery shopping, volunteer work that's important to you, entertainment, recreation of any sort. And then finally, I'm going to come back to that question of how has the pandemic changed your thinking and created a category that asks, are you comfortable and safe now? And now we are talking about the here and now. Are you comfortable and safe in your home, whether that is an apartment or a house? And that's because you're sharing it with somebody. I apologize for the watermarks on that picture, but I just love the two of them. If you've got a companion that you're going through this with, then that helps you feel comfortable. If it's a four-legged friend, like Fufu, we saw a little while ago, if you've got a four-legged friend to go through this with, that's gonna help. If you've mastered how to communicate with friends, families, social circles on the internet, that helps. If you've got a pendant, a device that allows you to call for help when you need it, if you had one before, if you need one now, that can help you stay secure and safe in your home and feel comfortable there. Maybe you've been inconvenienced by some restrictions, but if you've got somebody to shop for you, you've mastered, if you didn't already use them, the online ways and means of getting what you need when you need it, staying in touch with your support system and your safety net, and again, having the ability to call for help when you need it, then you may feel inconvenienced by all of this, but basically safe and secure. However, there are people who may be feeling worried, lonely, and afraid, even though they have a companion going through this with them. And people can feel very isolated and depressed going through something like this. Should I stay or should I go is meant to help you focus and look at your situation objectively on all of these levels. Since I created this PowerPoint, I'll let you know that oh, I'm sorry. First, before I go on to what I've done, I want to tell you what you do with that scorecard once you've completed it. Sorry. So you've checked off the right boxes for you on all of the categories we just went through. At the end, you total up the number of check marks you have in each column. And when you see the results, you then can compare that to this explanation. What does it mean if most of your check marks are in each of these columns? If you find most of your check marks are in column 1 or 2, then you're probably pretty comfortable and safe in your current home. Maybe a few minor adjustments to some structural things that would make it easier for you, eliminate maybe a little bit of a trip hazard, better communication even while you're restricted from going out and socializing. If you find that most of your check marks are in column number 3, you know, there might be some more significant changes, modifications you want to make, things that you have to change to be able to stay in your home or give more consideration to finding a residence that's better suited to your needs now. If you find that most of your check marks are in column 4 or 5, then it's probably time to give some serious consideration to an alternate residence. And the reason I stress that is because I always tell clients, staying at home in a long-time home is fine until the moment it's not. And I'm sure you all can think of somebody who, in an instant, a fall, an illness, the loss of a loved one, a pandemic, has changed everything. If you wait for that moment, then a lot of control is taken out of your hands. You have to make decisions on an emergency basis. If you are proactive, meaning don't wait to react to an emergency, but you're proactive when you can see that your home needs some modification, your life needs some modification in order to feel safe and secure there, then you can be proactive to make changes while they're in your control or while you're in control of them. So it's important to take an objective look at where you are. I took an objective look at the Should I Stay or Should I Go survey to prepare for today and made some updates, including asking at the top for you to think about questions 1 through 7 pre-COVID, and then the last question brings you back to the current time. And just made some simple modifications. You still will add your score up at the bottom there, and then it skips on to the next page to explain what you're looking at in terms of understanding your score, how many, where the most of your check marks are. I've also created recently a digital version, an online version of the survey. So you can go online, and there is a distinct URL or address, web address for that survey. And instead of a checkbox on a piece of paper, you choose a dot on each row to answer the same questions that are on the printed version. And at the end, this program doesn't tally your score, but when you click submit, it sends the survey to me. I can tally your score and send you the results and what they mean. I know that Margie is going to follow up on this session with both a PDF that you can print and use to take the paper version of the Stay or Should I Stay or Should I Go survey, and she will send you the link to the distinct URL if you want to use the digital form. And having showed you how that works, that brings us to the Q&A discussion, because the purpose of this tool is to focus your thoughts on this, to have a discussion based on what you've learned about your situation by using Should I Stay or Should I Go? So the natural conclusion for our session today is to open it up to Q&A and discussion. And I want to point out that there's a couple of people who are logged on here, colleagues of mine, who I asked to be present to help answer questions and to participate in the discussion. And I'm going to go to